Welcome to the Space Jam, man in the Space Jam. I don't really remember the lyrics to that. And it seemed to be better to sing that than I Believe I Can Fly for obvious reasons. Let's talk about Space Jam 2. So Space Jam: A New Legacy is directed by Malcolm D. Lee, and it stars LeBron James, Don Cheadle, Zendaya, and the Looney Tunes, and a whole bunch of characters from Warner Brothers IPs. And in this one, LeBron James, he and his son get involved into this Matrix type thing, and they get trapped in this thing that's controlled by Don Cheadle. And so Don Cheadle challenges LeBron James to a basketball game, and so naturally he has to recruit the Looney Tunes, because, you know, the original Space Jam, and they have to defeat him and his basketball team, and there's a bunch of Warner Brothers references throughout this entire movie. So I was not really looking forward to a new Space Jam movie because I'm not a big fan of the original Space Jam. I feel like it's one of those movies that, you know, it came out at the right time. It was the 90s. A lot of 90s movies are very goofy. A lot of them don't take themselves too seriously. And Space Jam was one of those movies. Like, you know, we love it because Michael Jordan's awesome and the Looney Tunes are awesome. But I just feel like, personally, a lot of the jokes were hit and miss for me to really enjoy it that much. And I know a lot of people say, well, it was made for kids, and I'm going to kind of talk about that at the end of this review. But anyway, I was not really looking forward to this. The new trailers didn't really interest me too much. It was surprising to see, seeing the trailers, all these Warner Brothers IPs, all of them just kind of in the background. Some really surprising, like A Clockwork Orange is in there for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway, we'll talk about that definitely. And overall, Space Jam: A New Legacy depends on whether or not you enjoy the first Space Jam movie. Because if you really enjoy it, you're probably going to really enjoy this movie as much. If you don't enjoy it as much like me, you're probably not going to like this movie very much. Yeah, I didn't really care for it. It's not that this movie's necessarily awful by any means, it's just nothing about it is really that amazing, unfortunately. So, is there anything in this movie that works? Don Cheadle is surprisingly very funny as the villain. I didn't really expect him to, be, this comedic villain. But he's actually surprisingly funny. He looks like he's having a good time. He has just the right amount of campiness. The right amount of campiness for a movie like this. He's funny. He gets really mad. He has hissy fits. It's actually really funny to see him do this. Also, I like the stuff with the Looney Tunes. They don't really lose a lot of what made them characters them. So I thought they were pretty funny throughout. Also, the movie has a pretty nice message about, parenting and because the main story involves LeBron James and his son. And the message overall is nice. It's it's important to get to know your kids and what they're interested in. Don't force them into boxes and such. So I thought the message itself was pretty nice. Also, there are some fun twists throughout the entire movie. The main basketball game, the rules that they apply for this new one, I thought was kind of clever. It's okay, so that at least differentiates itself from the original Space Jam enough. And meanwhile, it's not a retread of the original movie. That was one of my main concerns going to this movie is we're just on this trend in Hollywood where we just take all these old movies and we just redo them, just change things. Just change the characters' names, but it's just the same plots. They're just doing the same things. And I'm kind of glad that this new Space Jam didn't just do a complete retread of the original movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is some things that they just redo. Obviously there's a training scene. Obviously there's a recruiting scene. But it never really bothered me that it's oh, that's just from the original movie. It never was like that. It wasn't like Force Awakens where it's every moment was oh, I remember that from the original movie, but you get what I'm saying. And while the movie is not really a retread of the original movie, it is a retread of another 90s movie. I'm not going to say which one. It's a 90s movie that may not be critically lauded, but a lot of people really seem to enjoy. It's a family movie starring Robin Williams, that's all I'll say. And it occurred to me about halfway through, I'm wait a minute. This is this movie. They're doing that movie. Why? Why? It just didn't make sense to me. And that kind of leads into the bad things about this movie. LeBron James. Oh man, I didn't like him in this movie. If this was my first exposure to LeBron James, I probably wouldn't like him. I feel like he's just always negative throughout this entire movie. It's just kind of bland. He's just not really, it doesn't really feel like he's really into it. At least in the real world, it doesn't really feel like he's into it. But like once he enters the Warner Brothers universe, he's definitely a lot more interesting, like a lot more into the movie. But in this movie, no, he's just kind of mad about everything. And just, at least Michael Jordan, when he was in the original Space Jam, it's like, it was the right sense, like an amount of like taking it it was like taking it seriously and not taking it seriously at the same time. It worked there, but here he's just taking it seriously throughout the entire movie. It's just kind of bland, honestly. And there's a lot of meta commentary in this movie that just falls flat. I love meta movies, but this one it's obvious, and at the same time it's like none of it really works because it's like you're just doing the stuff you're commenting on. Like, LeBron James has this joke where it's like, athletes aren't really that good as actors. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Athletes aren't good as actors, says the basketball player who's starring in a lead role in this movie. Who's also not very good in this movie, unfortunately. Hey, he was good in Trainwreck, so I'll give him that. Or it's like they have this scene with executives with two really surprising cameos that I didn't really see coming. And it's like, it would be really funny if you guys were like actually soulless or something, but no, it's like, okay, we're soulless, but at the same time, it's like, please get into this whole universe of Warner Brothers movies. And there's so many references to Warner Brothers movies in this thing. And for a lot of it, it's just really kind of surprising because, like, this is a movie that's kind of supposed to be for everyone, obviously. Kids, adults, but a lot of the references are for adults. Like, there's a plot thread where a bunch of Looney Tunes are in various movies, and all those movies are for adults. And I'm just like, well, with the exception of, say, Daffy Duck and Porky Pig, but the rest are just like in random Warner Brothers movies that they could just throw in there. And only a couple of them work, like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner in the world of Mad Max Fury Road. That makes sense. But Granny in The Matrix, it doesn't really make sense. It really just doesn't make sense. And they have a lot of references to a bunch of these adult movies in a movie where they showed the Paw Patrol trailer before it. I don't know why. And there's even like one really surprising one, considering there's a really surprising cameo from Rick and Morty in this movie. And I'm like, after watching the episode that aired last week, I'm surprised that they would be in a kid's movie. It just doesn't really make sense. It's just like, why? It's like, are you trying to like make sure that the adults are interested in this movie? Because I would be more focusing on interesting the kids for this movie. Because when I went to this movie, some kids actually got up out of their seats and were just kind of like not interested in the movie. So that's bad. Again, I'm going to kind of talk about that and how, like, it's a kids movie and all that. And as far as the performances go, a lot of them are just forgettable. Like, the wife of LeBron James, Flat, his main kid is fine. His other one is kind of only there for a few jokes. And he has a daughter that he doesn't bond with. So we're supposed to care that he's supposed to get back to his family. But they don't have enough time to, like, have enough moments with each other. It just, why should I care other than the obvious? Like, the family needs to be together. Other than that, like, should I care? I don't care. And it's annoying. Also, the CGI. I was kind of mixed about the whole CGI of the Looney Tunes. Like, they still move like they're still 2D cartoon characters, so it wasn't, like, bad by any means. It just didn't really work for me. It's, like, at least it kind of worked for Sonic the Hedgehog, but here, no, it doesn't. And overall, I just say this movie is a mess. It's just a mess. It's like we're trying to do all these things. Trying to have this nice family drama. We're supposed to have this basketball game. We're supposed to have all these Looney Tunes there. We're supposed to have all these references to Warner Brothers stuff. And it just meshes into this, like, whole mess of a product that just, like, it wants to be everything. And by the end, it's just nothing. And it's just, on top of that, it just takes itself way too seriously. Like, did you not see the original Space Jam? That movie did not take itself seriously. But no, we have this movie that does take itself too seriously, and I'm just not enjoying it as much because what is the tone? Are you trying to be serious? Are you trying to be funny? Are you trying to be, meaningful? Are you trying to be lighthearted? What is the point? There is no point. And as far as, like, I'm concerned, like, the idea of, like, I shouldn't be too hard on this movie because it's made for kids. Again, kids got up during my screening of this movie. Why? It's like, were they not interested? That's my guess. They weren't really that interested. So it's kind of hard for me to say, I can't really be too mean on this movie because, it's for kids. I often hate that. It's like, oh, it's made for this group, so you shouldn't be too hard on it. Well, there are movies that are really good that were made for that group, but those movies are really good, so why can't this movie be really good? I'm not saying this movie has to be an Oscar contender by any means, but you could at least try. You could at least write funny jokes. You could make characters likable. You can do a bunch of things and try to make things clearer. But this movie doesn't want to do that. It wants to be everything and nothing. Did they not see the original Space Jam movie? It knew what it was, and it knew how to do it. And this movie doesn't. I'm kind of ranting at this point, but I did not really care for Space Jam 2. I'm sorry, I really just didn't. A couple of performances are fine. Some jokes work. And I do like the fact that it's not a retread of the original. I forgot about Zendaya. Zendaya's fine in the movie. Her voice work is fine, but it's I kind of forgot she was even in this movie, so it's not like she didn't leave any sort of impact on me, so it's what was the point? Also the Looney Tunes themselves, they don't really have any arc. They're kind of just thrown in there, and in this one, instead of the Looney Tunes seeking out Michael Jordan, LeBron James has to seek out somebody, and he's just a sourpuss throughout the entire movie. So Bugs in this movie, he has to find all his friends because he misses them. And that's really the closest arc you get for any of the Looney Tunes in this movie. And that leads into his adventure, but LeBron James is no, I want all these people for my basketball team, like the Iron Giant, King Kong, Superman, Batman, all these actual powerful people who can actually do this. But Bugs is no, we're not doing that. We're getting all my friends. And yet they do have some jokes about the original Space Jam, oh, yeah, this sounds really familiar. Hey, I got Michael Jordan here. Not that Michael Jordan, but oh well. Sorry, I'm spoiling this movie, but I don't care. I think the best thing I can say about this movie is because with all those references in the basketball game, I say this is probably a movie you could watch on pause. And now you can on HBO Max. This movie isn't even clever enough to be an HBO Max ad. It's just not even that funny. It's just not even that clever. It's just dumb. It's just really... Dumb is a strong word, but forgettable. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Just don't bother with Space Jam 2. Unless you really like the first Space Jam movie. In which case, you're probably going to enjoy this movie a lot more than I did. I'll give Space Jam: A New Legacy 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. It's not that it's bad. It's just not for me. So what'd you think of Space Jam 2? Do you think I'm just being too hard on this movie? Do you think you understand where I'm coming from? So it's just with kids' movies, I feel like some kids' movies go that extra level. And when they don't, people are just oh, it's a kids' movie. And that just brings all these other kids' movies down. So what do you think of this movie? What do you think of my rant? I don't know. I'm just rambling. So, are you going to watch Space Jam 2? Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.